Hi, thanks for coming by to watch this. Going to be doing a little commentary on this piece as we go through the time lapse. This was a private commission for a client's World of Warcraft character. Night Elf. She's sort of a tragic figure. In this scene, we're seeing her later in life after a series of tragedies. In another painting that I'll be doing soon, we'll see more of that backstory. So if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, leave a comment, all that good stuff. Really appreciate it. Means the world. I also co-host a podcast called Art Condition. It's aimed at artists, and you can see all of the content from that show on this channel as well. And if you're feeling real bold, you can visit the Patreon page that's linked in the description. That'll help support this effort more than you can imagine. So at the start of this, just kind of blocking in the big color masses. And I'm actually starting this piece a bit different than my normal approach. More often than not, what I do to start a piece is a full black and gray study. So just a full value study. And I've gotten really comfortable with that as a starting point because values are everything. Values are the most important part of a painting. If you get your values right, then you can get just about everything else wrong and people will forgive you, or at least they won't notice as much. But if you get values wrong, there's no going back. So I like to start with a black and gray piece, and of course digital makes that very easy, and then I start adding colors over it. I do that with gradient maps and overlay layers, different layer modes and layer adjustments. But in this piece, I started right in with the color. And I don't know if I have like a real good reason for doing that. It's happened in a couple of pieces recently. So pretty soon I'll be posting another time lapse of a painting that I did of this druid that's climbing through the trees. And if you follow any of my social media, you can see that piece. I'll post some links in the description. And a couple other ones. I've jumped right into color on a few pieces, and it's been more of just an inspirational thing. There's some method to it, some reasoning behind the madness, which is that in a piece like this, where the lighting is going to be real strong, and the lighting's going to be a really important part of the whole atmosphere. Lighting is an important part of any painting, but this one, it's going to be real dramatic, like lots of warm tones casting on her blue skin and the foliage and all that. And I just wanted to start getting a sense of that as soon as possible. And it's not that the values, become, less important. The values are still just as important as they always are, but the brightness and the vibrancy of the piece is what I wanted to make sure started coming through right away. And one thing that can happen with, starting with grayscale first is it can end up being more work in the long run in a piece that really has, this sort of like rich lighting vibrancy that I was aiming for in this piece. And if you start with black and gray, it can be a lot more work in the long run to kind of get that glow and that richness. It can still work, definitely, but I just wanted to jump right into the color. One thing that you'll hear a lot of the times when people are starting in color, or are starting with black and gray, is that it can end up feeling very flat and muddy, and that is true. I think the way to overcome that is that you have to do a lot of painting over that black and gray, and starting with a gradient map really goes a long way to boosting that. So if you're not familiar with gradient maps, and you want to kind of know more about that process, I really suggest doing some more research on how gradient maps work. They can be really, really fun to work with, and it's a good way to make a quick transition from that black and gray into a really rich, dynamic color scenario. Basically, the gist of gradient maps is that it's a one-to-one transition from value to hue, if you set your layer adjustments correctly. But people think of gradient maps sometimes as the end-all be-all, and it can't really be the end of the story. You have to do like a lot of painting over the gradient maps that you put over your black and gray. And I'm just sort of like going on this rant about that mainly because I've heard that comment a lot when I stream on Twitch, and when people see me starting with black and gray, that's a comment that I'll hear a lot, like, well, I've always had a problem. The comment will go something to the effect of, I've always had a problem starting with black and gray. The piece ends up looking flat. The colors aren't as rich. You get kind of muddy. All of those things that I was saying before. And really, the key ingredient there is how much painting and adjustment you do over the top of that initial value study. This is a very long-winded way of sort of coming back to that point of how it can be more work in the long run, especially for a piece that's going to have this much like bright, rich lighting. You'll notice in this that I spend a lot of time coming back to the face. And so that's the other thing that people will not forgive you for. If you get the face wonky, nobody likes that. The term you may or may not have heard is, the uncanny valley. Whoa. The uncanny valley. The uncanny valley is that effect that a face which is human, but is also, or a face that is made to appear human, but is obviously not human. That effect of, slight unsettling disturbance that you feel when you're looking at a robot face, or in a video game, a CGI face that isn't quite right. It's usually in the eyes, or it's in the teeth and like around the mouth. And that weird, the CGI in computer games has come so far. It's mind-boggling. I'm old, I remember old video games. It just blows my mind every time. But the one place that they keep having trouble with is eyes and teeth and the tongue and the way that the mouth works. Anyway, in paintings, if you get that off, that's one of the things that will really unsettle people about your painting and make it feel a little bit off. And it doesn't even have to be very much, just like if the eyes are out of perspective, or something is off about some of the planes and the lighting on a cheekbone. It doesn't take much, and something will just feel a little bit off, and And the viewer may not even know why. You know, an untrained eye might not be able to pick out the exact source of the problem, but it'll just feel a little bit off. But if you get it right and you get it looking nice, and, you know, again, people can forgive a lot of other things that may not be quite right about the piece. If you get the face right and you get your values, you get your values, man, values, values and the uncanny valley. These things are getting really mixed up in my mouth, but anyway, it's all to say that those are the two things that are going to be really important for pleasing both the trained eye, the viewer that has the trained eye, the viewer that has the untrained eye. So you'll see me go back to the face a lot in this, and the hair too. I struggled a lot with the hair, and that's something that happens a lot in pieces. For whatever reason, hair shape is a struggle for me. I know a lot of people say, oh, hands are difficult for me and feet. That's not that I don't struggle with hands and feet, but you know, I don't feel the same type of difficulty with hands and feet that I do with hair. I don't know what it is. I need to do a lot more hair studies. I look at other artists' hair and just there's so much action and dynamic structure to it, and the shapes are so good. And you know, I know that this can be self-defeating, that kind of line of thought, because you only see the finished product and you don't see how hard an artist had to work, or you know, how hard they hit their head against a wall trying to get it. But I don't know, just even though I know that appearances can be deceiving and it may look easy when it's not, there's still that final product that you end up with. And I always feel like I never quite get there with my hair. I don't know, that's something that I'm going to need to work a lot more on, and struggled with it in this piece. And for the last little bit, you've kind of, you know, you've seen a lot of how I've worked a lot on the face and making a lot of adjustments here to how the hair comes down over the head and transitions into the face, and I don't know how all of those planes and how all of those structures are working together. And this is a relatively simple hairstyle, and I was still just kind of, gosh, I guess sometimes it's easier if the hair has like more flowing, crazy motion to it, because you can hide a lot of what you don't know about what you're doing in, you know, the sort of crazy shapes that you can make in all of the hair. In this part, I'm trying to mess with the perspective of these tables. Didn't get them right to begin with, even though I did use some 3D modeling to set up the scenario of this piece. You know, because all of the structures that you see in the background, the environment of the greenhouse, the tables, all of the sort of like complex environmental elements, man, getting into 3D modeling has just been like such a lifesaver for that. And unashamedly admit that sometimes, for especially like the background and environments of like complex structures like this, I'll just straight up trace it from the 3D model, like rather than trying to rebuild it from scratch. If you've come this far, I feel like you've earned the right to hear me admit that yes, I do trace sometimes. There's only a little bit left in this video. At this point, you know, I'm just sort of doing some finalization on some of the foliage structures, some finishing touches, and some final elements to add in. So I really appreciate you watching. Again, if you enjoy this content, please consider visiting the Patreon page that you'll see linked in the description. Always give shout outs at the end of the videos. There'll be a little list of the names of the Patreon contributors that really work to support this, and can't say how much I appreciate that. I'm just going to let the rest of this play out. Really appreciate you watching. I hope that you have a great day.